All right, everyone, the red light is on and we are recording. This is Mark back for another episode of the Veteran Semi-Professional. So today's an interview episode where I'm interviewing a veteran about their life and career after the military. All an effort to help you if you're trying to figure out what am I going to do once I can put my hands back in my pockets, grow out my hair, and start wearing these things called quote unquote civilian clothes. This is a show for you. Okay. So I bring people on the show. We talk about, their transition from the service. We talk about, what they've been up to post-military. We talk about tools, tactics, frameworks that they've used, all an effort to help you and your family have a post military life that is successful and fulfilling for everybody involved. So super pumped for today's guest. We're talking specifically about owning a franchise and owning multiple franchise locations. And if you follow the show, I talk a lot about buying businesses. I've had some franchise related guests on the show, but this can be a really great path for veterans in particular. And so pumped to kind of get into the intricacies of that for everyone listening today. So Scott, if you can take a minute, introduce yourself, I'd appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you first, Mark, for letting me join the team today and look forward to our conversations. I'm Scott DeThomas, retired Air Force, 32-year veteran, started in the Army National Guard, was enlisted in the Air Force for a bit and then got commissioned through the Academy and finished up my career back in 2014 after about 32 years. I currently own several franchises of Mr. Handyman and Mr. Electric here in Colorado Springs, and really look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. And what did you do in the Air Force, Scott?
So I was pretty much an operator most of my life. I flew transports. Was blessed to get on the leadership track the second half of my career. So spent a lot of time in and out of school staff, different command assignments, and kind of consider myself an operator pretty much since going through flight school back in 1990.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, so one of the first questions I always want to ask is, what was your personal transition from the Air Force like? That's you spend a lot of time in uniform. It's a long career in the military, and that can be. I mean, that's a leaving the military in general is a big adjustment, and being there for 30 years and going into post uniform life is not a small step. So I'm kind of curious. What were some bright spots you might want to point out for people, and also maybe some speed bumps for those listeners coming in behind you?
Yeah, so absolutely respect. Everyone's transition is going to be very different. We go through the military and we get categorized early on through training and through performance. But then when you get out and you try to transition and find that next path post-military, it really becomes so different and diverse that I absolutely relate and understand with all the challenges that our men and women face when they leave the military. For me, mine was a little unique, a little bit different. I transitioned from a high-level position in the Air Force to a high-level position in a credit union. A lot of my success as it applies to transition really was kind of two or threefold. One, surround yourself with good people that can help you. I enlisted the help of professionals. I had three professional coaches, executive coaches, helping me in that transition. I know a lot of times we don't think about those things, or we think, oh, that's expensive. It could, interfere with what you're getting through TAP or through the network. The reality is that civilian executive coach was probably the lifesaver for me. She really put me into a path of what I should be looking for, what I should be expecting on the backside of my 32 years of military. So definitely enlisting yourself or surrounding yourself with some coaches, and maybe break away from some of the military specific ones. All too often, I do think the veterans all ranks status coming out of the military are undervalued when they get out. It's easy to get people put into a box based on rank and what you did in the military. Unfortunately, most veterans aren't being valued at the right level when they leave. So that was a big plus from using the executive coaches. Second big thing I remember most was you really do have to network. And networking isn't going to the Sergeants Association meeting or the CGO meetings. You really got to get outside your circle, because most people on the outside have no idea what we did in the military. So it's critical that you get out there and understand if you're trying to transition to a civilian position that may not be directly related to a military position, the burden really is on you to find out more about it, understand how they speak, understand the requirements, get inside that space so that you can present yourself as somebody that's knowledgeable when it comes to that actual first interview or that first connection of somebody that's going to help you. So definitely get out, network, find 2 or 3 groups that you can get out, relate, learn about what it feels like, looks like, smells like. I can remember I used to go to a lot of networking events through the chamber in my last role in the military. And a lot of times I really, as I knew I was leaving, I almost became a fly on the wall in spite of my position because I just wanted to hear. I wanted to hear how people spoke to each other. I wanted to hear how civilians collaborated in these different social formats, in these forums, unlike us, where we can rattle off 1,000 acronyms. And at the end of a 2-minute conversation, Mark, I guarantee you understood what I said. But you have to get out and learn the vernacular. And then really at the end of it is don't be afraid to ask for help. Veterans traditionally have a long history of not asking for help. And that's the scary part because successful transition really does require a lot of help. Don't be afraid to ask. And I'm super excited about talking about franchising today because that's one of the elements in transition that a lot of folks overlook. And we'll talk some more about that as we go on. But I'm a big proponent of don't just look at civilian life or government contract jobs. That's typically about a 50-50 split in most people's transitions. I challenge our folks to go out and do a third. So do a third in that government contracting space, do a third about what that civilian job might look like, but then take the same level of energy, learn about business ownership, business opportunities, franchising, starting your own business, because ultimately it's probably of those 3 categories, it's probably the place where most people are going to find the highest level of satisfaction because your skills are 100% transferable, unlike trying to fit your skills into a box that somebody created on a job post. So I'll leave it there. But all in all, my transition went very successful. I left a C-suite level job in the Air Force and started the next day. Very blessed, but that had to do with that network and the position I was holding inside my last base, where I had familiarity with the right people in the town of Tampa. So.
Yeah. Well, two things I definitely want to touch on there for everyone. First, and this is a theme that's come up multiple times on the show with a variety of guests, is that language piece of, you and I could, just like you said, you and I could probably sit here and talk for a couple minutes and rattle off a bunch of acronyms, and everyone listening here would probably understand, 90% of it. And then a civilian listening to the show, like, what the heck did these guys just talk about for the last couple of minutes? Right. There's
right.
Just like, if you were in the Navy and you went and did a joint assignment with the Air Force, the Army somewhere, there's new language pieces and cultural dynamics you got to understand just working across services. Even there's a language piece and a cultural piece you need to learn and adapt to. Okay. And I think oftentimes when I'm speaking with transitioning service members, they have this chip on the shoulder pride sometimes of, well, the world should adapt to around me and should learn to accommodate, my language and my culture and everything. And I would just challenge and say, like, you're going into a new environment, and it's on you to learn how those people interact in that environment. Okay. And then I want to go back to, your first piece of engaging with, non-military, non-veteran related coaches. Okay. And granted, you were in a slightly different position probably than a good amount of people on the show. Like, you're a pretty senior leader in the Air Force at that point. But I brought this up it's come up a couple times in the show where I encourage people. There are a lot of great veteran transition programs and nonprofits out there and everything. And, it's really appealing to want to go after the low hanging fruit of what is free and readily available. Okay. Sometimes I think there can be some tremendous ROI in just dedicating a little bit of time and effort, and sometimes, financial capital, to investing in yourself early on and seeing where that can get you. And a very tangible examples I'll sometimes share with people is just preparing your resume. All right. I've seen a ton of resumes that come from folks who went through some type of veteran transition program, and more often than not, they're not very good. And then I've seen ones where someone paid someone maybe a couple $100 to spruce it up. And I'm like, okay, I can see a tangible difference here. It makes a little bit of difference. Okay. And I think often while you're in service, we have so many things that are provided to us for free. You need marriage counseling. There's someone on base to do that. You need your taxes done. There's someone on base to do that. And so we're kind of used to and accustomed to the lifestyle of there's a service I can go to that will do this for me. You may have a place in your transition, and not everyone will have this, but you may have a place where it's worth it to engage a service. And you might be able to get some benefit out of that. So I just want to put that on everyone's radar. I'm not encouraging everyone to go pursue that path, but I wouldn't say rule it out either, because it may help you out in the process.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, Mark,
Please.
for a minimal investment, and at my level, it was seriously just maybe a few $1,000s of help that I paid for, was the difference of about 25 to 50% of the first job offer on the backside of it. So we sometimes don't plan on that as well as we should. I would highly recommend, even at a low end budget, to put a couple $1,000s aside to make sure you've got the right level of support at the level you're trying to go after. Because everything I was hearing from the government programs, from the Bro Network, was pigeonholing me into a box. And then to meet an outside third party with no military background to take your military resume and say, hey, Scott, you're comparable to X, and this is what we're going to shoot for in your transition. That was huge. I mean, night and day from where I thought I was going to be to where I actually landed. And that's why it's so important. And you hit on it perfectly, Mark, is we tend to keep inside our circles. So, hey, Mark, you just transitioned. How'd it go? What do I need to know? Right. And nobody knows if Mark really reached his full potential when he got that job at the contracting, on base, or wherever he ends up. But when these outside third parties get involved, they don't, there's no pigeonholing. There's just open, hey, 98, 99% of society that executives or hiring authorities have no idea what you're worth. So find out what you're worth from a non-binding third party that has no interest in, getting you into a contract job or a GS job, those kind of things. Those are all admirable and honorable. And I encourage people to pursue those if that's the right fit. Just don't sell yourself short.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you said that very well. Okay. So you left the Air Force and went into a credit union. Is that what I heard?
Yes, my title was Chief Experience Officer. It was basically I was the experience executive in charge of the retail side of operations. So call center, retail centers, buildings, facilities, cat and dogs inside the credit union, where operational experience was more important than maybe credit union experience.
Right. And I think, a lot of veterans are probably going to trend towards operations just because, if you've been a part of something where you're planning, multiple ships, multiple plane aircraft flying, or, platoons moving on the ground, or just and placing machine guns somewhere, or whatever it is, that's a lot of nuts and bolts, people moving, understanding how resources and people operate in time and space. And that's very useful. I'm thinking back to a memory of a guy by the name of Patrick Dossett I had on the show. He was a former Navy SEAL, and he was going into an interview with Google, and it was for an operations role. And they were like, tell us about your operations experience. And he was like, he kind of froze. And he's like, I don't really know if I have operations experience. And then like, he's in the first 2 minutes of this interview, and and they both kind of looked at each other like, I don't know if this is going to go anywhere right now. And he was like, wait, no, timeout. Then he talked through the process of, putting his SEAL platoon onto some STVs and launching into a beachhead and everything. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, that totally makes sense. We don't have, submarines in Google, but we understand the operational aspects and planning that went into putting these people into this, and the time planning and understanding how these things are going to move in time and space. This makes sense to us. And it's just understanding, going back to that language piece of what is the language they're speaking and how do I translate what I'm talking about into that language.
Perfect. Yeah, and I went through several or interviews in my transition, several different companies, and obviously you get a little bit better with every interview, and it really is it's on the veteran to walk into the room with the ability to translate, possibly educate whoever's you're interviewing with, because they don't know what Sergeant so and so did as a rifleman or artillery or whatever, right? They think they know, they see something on TV, they have some preconceived bias or notions, but it's really important. And that's to my earlier point, is like, you got to socialize and mix it up with those folks. And it can be as simple as just, intermingling with the folks at the church groups, or your baseball team with your kids, or finding a private professional group locally. Lots of chambers doing lots and lots for military veterans and offering free memberships and participation and in different events through the chamber. Dude, just go be a fly on the wall. Just ask questions like, hey Mark, what do you do? And don't leave it at there. Ask multiple questions and get the feel for how people outside the uniform communicate. And a lot of it's very same. It's not cosmic, but you just have to learn how to convert, translate what we've been trained to speak in short blurbs,
Right.
keep it simple. Well, that doesn't always work on the outside if you're the only one talking in acronyms.
Right, right. So, did you go straight into franchising from that role?
From the credit union, I
Yeah.
did. I spent just shy of 5 years at the credit union. The majority of time there, loved it. It was a great opportunity, very blessed by what that provided my family and I, and just a really good opportunity for who I was and where I transitioned. I always had the desire to own my own business. I just, the transition came fairly quickly. We kind of decided 6 months before we actually retired that we were going to do this. We're still probably had a little bit of legs in our Air Force career if we had chosen to go that route. And so it came pretty fast. And as a result of that, we weren't in a position to really pursue this thing called franchising or business. And that just took a little while to kind of build up the resources and the momentum to think like, okay, this is probably where you want to be.
Okay. So I always kind of want to dig into decision points in the fuzzy area between ideation and action on something. Okay. So you had the idea probably burning for a while of, I really like the idea of eventually owning my own business. When did, you're at this great career. When did the idea kind of come back to you of, okay, I want to start acting on this? And like, what did the first steps look like for you in, starting to look into small business ownership opportunities?
Yeah, so it's pretty fascinating because I pretty much knew the first year that I was in a good place and I enjoyed a lot of what I was doing. But fundamentally, I knew I was going to be challenged with some of the aspects of working in an environment that's very different than the military at the highest levels. So early on, I pursued, like in year one, within a few months of being at the credit union, I loved it. I enjoyed it, but I also realized I had this passion to go pursue something else. So within the first year, I was actually selected to be in the Chick-fil-A pipeline. Um,
And,
so in
sorry, if I can jump in just for a second, for everyone's reference, that's a very hard path to get into. I think Chick-fil-A has a lower acceptance rate than Harvard Business School. They're very picky and choosy about who they get to be franchise operators. So that's no small feat.
Thanks. Yeah. So in year one, by the end of my first year, I thought I was going to Chick-fil-A. I had done all my homework. I'd been through multiple. I'd been selected. So I was really excited. We had some restrictions on, mobility at the time. We were caring for family members. So we were kind of had put Chick-fil-A in a box with what we were willing to move for. But it just took longer as we progressed. A couple of years went past, and the selection process is, like you said, extremely challenging. It's almost 10 times harder to match. What I found from my time in the system was they put 100 in the pool every year, but they only pull a few out every year because a lot of their new stores are being given to internal employees, multi-unit owners. So the external candidate has a smaller chance of matching. And it takes about 5 to 7 years to match. So that was the decision point to make the transition. And then maybe a little bit of frustration setting in. taking too long to move with Chick-fil-A, followed by, coincidentally, I was working on an MBA. My graduation thesis is on a friend's water remediation company. My couple chapters are market analysis and franchising. So that kind of took me down a different path of, okay, maybe the other opportunity is not going to come to fruition, but man, this sounds really exciting. And by that point, I felt like I'd done enough homework to understand this home services industry that I'm participating in today was really a place that I could do well in. So I think I knew fairly quickly. When you transition, like most, for me, it came really fast and furious. I was still in command of a large organization. I couldn't really publicize the fact that I was transitioning. So the first few months, even though we told the boss in January, it was probably March or April before my team knew I was leaving. So a lot of what I was doing was behind the scenes
Right.
and very hush hush on, and so not fully engaged or fully active with that transition. So yeah, I think I knew if I had more time, I think, like I recommend, spend time early on franchising and business ownership, because had I had the resources, I think I would have done it immediately. I don't think I had the time or the resources at that time to do it. I wasn't prepared.
I'll also say for anyone interested, by the time this episode comes out, I'll have published an episode with Paul Huzar, who runs VetCore, which is a water, fire, mold remediation business with franchise opportunities, and they're kind of specifically focused on veterans. So very cool concepts. It's a great business to get into. So anyway, for anyone interested out there, I would definitely check out Paul. He's super approachable. And got a great business and has a serious passion for helping out veterans too. So awesome guy to check out. So
yeah, and I'll just, small world. I'll second that endorsement. That graduation thesis I wrote was on Paul's business.
I was
He was,
wondering that when he said it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, he was kind enough to open up his books and his business to my the team of 6 students that we had doing the thesis. So
Very
Paul's a
cool.
good friend and remarkable what he's trying to do for veterans.
Yeah.
He's my hero for all that he does in that
Yeah.
space, for sure.
Yeah. So
Don't tell him I said that. Can you bleep that out? I'll never hear the
yeah,
end of
yeah, no. He's a
it.
terrible guy. I don't talk to him. He's awful. Yeah, for sure.
As a
So,
West Point grad, I'll never hear the end of it. Did you say I was your hero? I was like, oh God, I need to retract that.
that's the clip we'll share for sure for everybody to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so you went through the Chick-fil-A process and everything. And I had no idea it was a 5 to 7 year match on the back end too. That's kind of incredible. How did you then start to evaluate other franchise opportunities, and then how did you ultimately decide on what you landed on?
Yeah. So you definitely want to explore a couple, like clear the air on franchising real quick, and things that people fundamentally sometimes make the mistake of. Most people think they have to have a background or an understanding of what franchise. So I really don't think that's the case. You want to find a business model that works for you, whether it's time, whether it's resources, whether it's how much you can make, little make, all those things go into the decision. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be, in my case, a handyman or an electrician. I'm not either, and I've never been in the bands. Our particular model that Neighborly promotes is looking for good, sound-minded decision maker leaders to run businesses. So clear the air on that you have to necessarily have a skill that matches with the business you buy. For me, excuse me, it was really the handy model specifically. As much as it is about the actual trades being done, the majority of the model is about good customer service. So coming from where I was at, having always had a belief in you treat people well and they'll treat you well, it felt like a good fit to find something in the space that says, hey, customer service is really important. I did review probably 8 to 10 different concepts. I searched, I called, I got information, I read some financial disclosures, and then just kind of kept coming back to this particular brand. But you want to do your homework, you want to explore. Again, get help if you're not sure. Neighborly has some great folks that will help you navigate the 19 brands available through Neighborly, but franchise coaches and folks can help you as well, because there's a million franchises out there, probably more than that, and concepts you may not even know exist. But once you get into the conversation and you can match your likes, dislikes, they're going to find you 2 or 3 models that might fit your intentions or your strategy of where you want to be post-military. But do your homework. Like I said, I looked at probably 8 to 10 different brands while I was in the Chick-fil-A pipeline, and started to get the hopes of, or trying to finalize the hopes of moving on from the credit union.
Gotcha. Okay. And quickly, so I actually just came across Neighborly myself. I don't know, about 2 months ago. I was looking at a AirServe franchise, which I think is maybe eventually how I found you. I was trying to find people in the Neighborly brand. Can you just quickly describe like what Neighborly is, kind of give people an idea of how, you know, there's a concept of like individual franchise, but there's a couple of brands out there that are part of a much larger brand, such as Neighborly. So can you just quickly describe like what Neighborly is and how, Mr. Handyman fits underneath that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Neighborly is the largest home service provider in the U.S. They have the most brands, one of the largest companies. Probably at some point, it might be the largest in the world. That's their goal. They have some international presence. They have a good presence in Canada. But what you find when you go to a Neighborly is they have 19 brands of different flavors of home services that the average consumer is using, whether it's glass cleaning, whether it's Molly Maid, whether it's AirServe, HVAC company, electric, plumbing, handy. There's a full plethora that they can offer a veteran or a potential small business owner. The beautiful thing about Neighborly is it was originally founded by the Dwyer family. Mr. Dwyer was a veteran. He's one of the first people to stand up Vet Friend, which is an international organization, predominantly in the U.S., where it helps veterans in funding opportunities and discounts so that you can buy franchises. Neighborly does offer franchise discounts for all its veterans. And basically, Neighborly is this conglomerate of brands that every community needs. And that's the beautiful thing. So that's why my earlier comment about, hey, you don't need to be a glass guy to own the Glass Genie. It's a window cleaning company. You can be a business owner that hires a team of guys that like to clean windows, but you don't have to have the ability to get up on the ladder and clean windows. Just like our electric company, I own the Mr. Electric here in Colorado Springs. I hold the electric contractor's license, but I have to have a master electrician assigned to me. And it'd be no different than if you did the AirServe, Mark. HVAC's the same way. Unless you're a certified HVAC guy, you can own the HVAC company, AirServe, but you would have to have a licensed guy assigned to your team. And that's the beautiful thing. Neighborly's probably one of the more proficient in this space. They really do get it. I think we're up to 300 or 400 veteran owners out of over 5,000 total in the system. The beautiful thing, and this is just a testament to kind of affirm for the curious listener, is I went to my first convention in 2019. 10 top producers crossed the stage for Mr. Handyman. 5 of 10 were veterans. I've now, in the last 4 years, continued to run into the top producers from all the brands, and there's a common theme that the veterans do really well in this space. And the uniqueness of Neighborly is they are such an established company. They have established procedures, established operation manuals, established vendors. It really becomes a huge advantage, especially for a veteran that's a little bit intimidated by the business ownership. They're going to give you 80 or 90% of the solution, and it's really yours to mess up. And that's the beautiful thing. I don't know if all the brands do that. I didn't get that that sense from talking to some of the other, that I was shopping back when I was looking. But Neighborly does a really nice job making you successful, from onboarding coaches to franchise business coaches. I talk to my business coach once every week or two on both of my brands. They're here for me to keep me posted, help me navigate problems. And the one that's really closely related to our veteran relations, Mark, is it's an amazing network of owners. The owners in both franchises were all in it together. I just got back from Tampa, where 50 of the owners from Mr. Handyman, on their own dime, non-Mr. Handyman related, get together to talk about how to grow our businesses. And I'm in a peer group of 6 guys that all want us to succeed as collaboratively as possible. So you're not alone. That's the beautiful thing. When you get out, you have Neighborly standing behind you, you have your brand standing behind you, you have a business coach, you have other owners, you have other veteran owners. So the network to support you in your transition, Mark, is huge. And that's really probably the thing that sold me on Mr. Handyman, because they give you a bunch of phone numbers when you're doing your due diligence, and like, hey, call Mark, see what Mark thinks about it, right? And they gave me 4 or 5 numbers of veterans, and that's who I wanted to talk to. Hey, Mark, you've been doing this. Is it as real as they say it is? And you get the real perspective. But those individuals, that network of owners, really has contributed to my success and where I'm at today. So that's the difference when you go with like a Neighborly that really knows how to do this well.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to touch on there for the audience that I think makes veterans particularly attuned to being successful inside franchises. Okay, so in my travels and looking at different franchises, a lot of them actually even prefer people who don't have a background in whatever the business is. They want someone who can be a good leader, can step in, implement systems, follow their procedures. They don't necessarily, sometimes they don't even want the person who was, a previous electrician, because you might have some previous bad habits or systems that you're used to operating in that isn't how this model works. Okay. Not always, but like some franchises can work in there. Okay. So from the franchisor perspective, so, Neighborly in this case, they're saying, okay, we want someone who feels comfortable stepping in on day one, leading a team, is very comfortable in operating, our standard book of plays here. We have a standard operating procedure on how we run businesses that, as you said, delivers 80-90% of the solution, and someone who's going to work hard and, be a part of the local community. And if you're listening to this right now, like, that's veterans. We're a great fit for that model. And then I think the other piece you touched on there is, entrepreneurship and small business ownership can be a very lonely path. Just like, if you're in command of a unit or the senior leader in an organization, it can be lonely at the top. And having that peer group around you of people you can reach out to who are experiencing the same challenges that you are can be very helpful, not just from a business perspective, but just from a, emotional, social aspect of having someone to share ideas with and kind of commiserate with on the challenges of running that small business. And that's been a continuous theme that I've heard from franchisees, of having that network of other people to tap into is hugely helpful. And it's, very typically what I hear is, especially with like a nationwide brand, you're in Colorado, if you call the Mr. Electric in Wisconsin, that person's probably they're not worried about you competing with them, right? Like, it's in the same brand. You're not cringing on their market or anything. And it's just, hey, how can we help each other out here a little bit? And I think all those aspects make being part of a franchise very attractive to veterans in particular, because we're coming from somewhere where those bonds of service and camaraderie and everything are very much tied to our time in uniform, and we want to find another place to find that post-military.
Absolutely. And he said one thing that I'd like to help just demystify the anxiety that comes with the word entrepreneur. We use the word entrepreneur so fluently that
Right.
it scares veterans, and I absolutely understand why, and I've watched it. And so when we use it, I almost feel like we have to break it out just a little bit and help veterans with the translation. So the majority of Americans think Elon Musk, entrepreneur. That's intimidating, right? If you're a veteran, oh my God, I could never. Well, the entrepreneurial spirit really rests and lies in all of us that have succeeded in the military. We might call it something different. We might call it, package it differently on your performance report or your yearly. There's a bullet that says Mark improved something XYZ%, right? And that's really, yeah, there's entrepreneurs that can take something from ground zero and blow it up and make millions of dollars. That's not the focus of franchising, and nor does it need to be for veterans. It's really important that veterans not be intimidated, because I guarantee, whether you're E4 or 04 or whatever rank you are, I promise you, you've sat in positions, you've made it better, you've tried to improve things, you've made a difference in the organizations that you've contributed to, whether it's as a follower or as a leader. Those are elements of entrepreneurs that make them successful. Those are the things that really make you successful in this thing we call franchising, because we're giving you the model, we're giving you the idea, we're giving you the system support and everything you need behind it. So the creative sense of entrepreneurship is really reduced to a bit, almost a minimum. Yeah, you have to be creative when something's not going right. Yeah, you have to be creative to overcome challenges, but you don't have to create that service or that product. And that's usually what entrepreneur really focuses on. It's my point and my contention that a lot of military get intimidated by the word entrepreneur. And I think, as a, somebody who's out advocating for it, Mark, we got to do a better job. It's like, no, the word entrepreneur looks and smells a lot like everything you've done in your military, right? I can't tell you a single performance report that doesn't say Scott improved something XYZ as, action officer X. While every one of us has that on our performance report. Guess what? That's what you need to, that's the entrepreneurial spirit you have to bring to owning a franchise. Just finding solutions, looking for ways to make things better. But we're going to give you 80 or 90% of the answers to the test. Now you just have to carry it through with your leadership and the skills you've learned. And like I said, I've yet to meet an unsuccessful veteran owner in either of my two systems. So definitely, look at it at least 1/3 of the energy.
I would say, for everyone listening, there was probably a time in your service where you were asked to do something where you didn't have enough time, you didn't have enough resources, you didn't have enough people, you didn't have enough, you were like,
Absolutely.
someone said, I need you to do XYZ. You've got 9 hours to do it. You're like, I need 24 and 15%, more widgets to make this happen. They're like, great, you have 9 hours to do it. And this is what we got. Right. Like, right. And like, that's what entrepreneurship is taking those resources and making it happen somehow. And at some point in your career, I almost guarantee you did that somewhere along the way. And it could be something small, just, fixing something on the ship somewhere, or, reorganizing the warehouse of parts or whatever it was. You did that somehow. I'd be very surprised if you didn't have some story of that from your service. So we all had experience in that in some way, shape, form, fashion, or the other, for sure.
Absolutely. That's a great summation on that. You're all entrepreneurs. I to this day, I have no doubt that each and every one of us that served in the military, every day in basic training, you woke up with a way like, how am I going to get through this day? I got to figure out a better way to do this. I got to get my stuff together over here. That's the spirit of being an entrepreneur.
So when you got your first location, was this a resale, or did you start up a new location?
I started new here in Colorado Springs with the Mr. Handyman model in early 2019. We opened 3 units of Mr. Handyman. There had been an owner like 8-10 years previous that had not survived the last economic downturn back in 2008, 2010 timeframe. Excuse me. So we came in guns ablazing, and it's a great military town with great people. So it's been a journey. It's been fun.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've heard about franchising is that once there's 2 different ways you can access getting into a franchise. You can go the starting a new location route. You can also buy a resale, like someone's they've had a Mr. Electric or whatever it was for a long time, and now they're ready to sell the business and move on to something else. And very often, especially with the resales, they don't really get exposed to the public as much. But like once you're in the system, once you're kind of in the brand, the community, if you will, it can be easier to access those opportunities. And I think one of the great things about someone, one of the things when I was looking at AirServe in particular, one of the things very attractive about Neighborly is like once you're in, a Mr. Electric, now all the doors kind of start to open a little bit for other opportunities kind of within the same brand. Has that broadly, I don't know, it's very generically speaking, like have you kind of seen that to be true or not in your experience?
Absolutely. And so the opportunity to do more inside this brand of brands under the Neighborly umbrella is going to be there. So if you're successful with one, they're going to want you to, and
Right.
you have that ambition and that drive and the resources to open a second. They're absolutely going to look in favor on you. The resale thing, just the nuance there, though, for the listeners, it's a big commitment on dollars. It's one thing to have to bring 10% of $150,000 to a small business loan to maybe buy one unit of a franchise, which is about the average cost for most
Right.
of the Neighborly brands. There's a couple that are higher expense because of equipment needed, but the average veteran, if you have 10, 15, $20,000 available, you can qualify for an express SBA loan, $150,000, and that'll fund you for the first year of business. The challenge is on the resale market, 10% of something much greater than that obviously requires a lot more investment on the front side. So that's the only caveat there, Mark, is, an existing business. Absolutely. I've now recently purchased an existing business back in November. One of our neighboring territories was ready to close up, and the owner and I negotiated a settlement, and we now own his territory. There's definite perks and advantages to buying an existing. Neighborly actually, just in the last year or two, is standing up a stronger presence in the resale market because Neighborly's about 25 to 30 years old for a lot of the brands, and they're 10-year contracts. So, it seems like the average owner does two tours of 10. They get to the 20-year point, and Neighborly's recognizing that, oh, we should get involved in helping. That's the other cool thing they provide. I mean, they're providing you an avenue to resell your business. There's not a lot of other franchises out
Yeah.
there, and you're not going to get that on your own. They now have a division that does resales for Neighborly when people are calling. So again, another perk of going with a company as notable and as successful as a Neighborly, because it is something that every business owner needs to think of. We didn't get into that yet, and I know we're probably getting close on time, but the things to think about as a veteran: how do you establish yourself for retirement and wealth to pass on to your family, and so on and so forth? Well, if you don't retire with a 20-year retirement, right, and you're a 1 or 2 term servant of the military, how do you build wealth? How do you get to that point where you can leave your family enough money to take care of them or your children when something happens? Franchising allows you to do that, right? I now in a position where I have 2 or 3 options. God forbid something happens to me. We've built a business that's going to be big enough that it's going to be worth something on a resale market, or it's going to be something that can be passed on and run by our children or my wife. Those are things that we have to start to have that dialogue and educate veterans on, because my military retirement is amazing. We don't truly value that until you get out and you look back and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But 80 something percent don't ever see a military retirement. So
Right.
those folks, this is really a good opportunity to get there faster. I mean, think about it. If you're a business owner, you can, and you're successful, you and your wife can both put a lot of money away into a retirement fund really quick. Upwards of $100,000 a year for me and my wife, we could be putting into our 401k. Totally legal, totally, through the business network. How quick can you get to that point where you have a decent retirement nest egg at a young age, 35, 40-year-old that maybe didn't retire? So there's a lot of advantages to it. I wish we could educate more veterans. So again, I can't say it enough for what you're doing, Mark. I appreciate it.
Well, one last question before we start getting to the closeout. I want to be respectful of your time. So one, very often people, when they're looking at franchises, can be turned away from the franchise fees. Okay. The
Mhm.
way, most franchises, and for those of you who are just listening right now, Scott's smiling because I think he knows where I'm going with this. Uh, and you've touched on a lot of like the great benefits that come from being part of the franchise. Okay. And for those of you listening, the way most franchises work, I'm going to throw out some like very broad numbers, but you can kind of typically expect you're going to have to pay a percentage of revenue, usually somewhere in the 5 to 8% range, something like that, based on your sales. And then usually there's some type of like marketing fee you also have to pay and everything. Some people see that and just balk right away. They say, well, that's like a toll I got to pay, every month or every quarter or something just to own the business. Like, what am I getting out of that? Did you have any of those, conniptions yourself as you were looking at this opportunity?
Now, and my smile is because you get that question a lot when we're out kind of talking to folks. What Neighborly charges us in royalties, I couldn't generate the amount of business that I've generated in a very short period of time without the network and support of what that royalty fee is buying me, from the manuals, ops manuals, the support, the changes, the anytime something's wrong with my website, I drop a note and it's fixed, and just all those things. The other thing that people have to come to terms with, okay? So let's just take Mark's handyman service versus Scott's Mr. Handyman services and do a comparison. We both open on day one with the dreams of making billions of dollars, right? Mark, your website will never compete with my website, ever. Mark, you don't have the resources, you don't have the money, you don't have the network that comes behind this machine we call Neighborly. Every one of the 5,500 owners that have a Neighborly website are linked to a Neighborly website, which are linked to my websites. So Google, if you know anything about Google, it's all about calculus and how much time and money people are spending on your websites. We have a $4 billion entity called Neighborly who has this ginormous website, and it's all pitching in to make my website credible here in Colorado Springs. Within my first 9 months, I showed up in the first five on a Google search. Mark, I don't care
That's
how
that's
good
no
you
that's
are.
that's that's a big deal.
Mark, I don't care. Mark, I don't care how good you are. I don't care if you're a marketing PhD that solved world crisis through marketing. You could never, ever, as an
Yeah.
independent, get on the first page ever, almost ever. And second, 80% of my organic traffic in searches come through Google. So it's reality. It's the cost of doing business. And there's a podcast, and I wish I had saved it. This individual, he was a franchise seller or coach, broker, and he was dismissing that thing. He goes, would you pay, how much money do you want to make? Pick a number. I don't know, say the millions, say it's $1 billion. Okay, do you care if it costs you 75% to the franchise, but you made your $1 billion? If your goal is to make $1 billion and it costs the franchise took 75% of it because they gave you all the resources for you to reach your goal, would you care? And it was enlightening because I've never thought about it like that. I'm like, darn, that's good. It doesn't matter. It's the cost of that is the cost of doing business, and the business that you're trying to grow. If the 8 to 10% is preventing you from getting to your goals, I don't think it's the 8 to 10%. If you've got numbers in mind and a strategy to own a market, that 10% is helping you get there. It's not detracting from getting there. There's no way I could have got to the numbers I'm at today in 3 years without paying that 10% over the last 3 years. So
Yeah.
hopefully I dismissed that thought. But like I said, if you want to get to $1 billion and you had to pay 75% to get there, what is your goal? Is it the $1 billion, or, oh my God, I got to pay Mark 75, whatever that is, percentage to get there, $750 million to get there? Dude, your goal is to get to $1 billion, and that's the cost of getting to your goal.
I
So
think another way I reframe it in my head a little bit is you're going to be paying that even if you started the business yourself, you're going to be paying that money somewhere. Like you're going to be paying that 8% to have someone else create your website and pay SEO to
Right.
get there and everything. It's going to come out one way or another. Uh, and if you can use that to tap into, international network and get all the great exposure and back end help there and everything, I mean, it seems like a pretty good deal to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you're going to be, as an independent, you're going to be capped out by the capacity in one person, right? I have this monster network behind me that, yes, I spend a lot of money paying them, but I get it in return. I mean, being today, I've got 4 websites. All 4 websites will be in the top 3 of any search you do, right? And if 80% of my revenue is coming from that 10% is insignificant. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Scott, this has been awesome. I really hope we change the minds on franchising today. I hope some of you go and start going down the rabbit hole on it. So in a minute, I'm going to pass it back over to you to provide any last thoughts, parting shots, words of wisdom to the crowd here. But before I do, there's a question I was asking my guests at the end of the show. So you think back to your 30 years in the Air Force. What was the best and or worst chow hall you ever went to?
I went to a lot of bad ones. Oh man. Best chow hall. I think Diego Garcia, and I hate praising the Navy, but I think they had a pretty good spread at Diego.
Where
The
is that?
war It's out in the middle of the Pacific,
Okay,
Diego Garcia.
gotcha.
When you're making Pacific runs, it's a stopping point for fuel, and overnight there's a naval air station there. Um, this wasn't necessarily the worst chow hall, but it was the worst chow hall experience. I was part of the team, the drawdown team, and I had combat truckers in Iraq. And the last month of drawdown, when we were bringing all the supplies home, I did a trip with them, and there was no food anywhere we went. So all the chow halls had left a box of MREs or some leftovers, and we had to take care of ourselves. So probably one of those forward operating bases up in northern Iraq was probably my worst chow hall experience ever.
Yeah, the like drawing down or starting up new locations kind of
Yeah,
to get back to our idea of like starting a new business, right? You're going to be starting off with a box of MREs, okay, right?
right.
Um, I know I had some guys that were starting a new location in Iraq, and it was the first time we'd had U.S. soldiers there in a while, and I think they lived on like turkey sandwiches for like a month or something. Meanwhile, across the road at the embassy, they had smoothie bars and kale salad stations and everything. Right, right.
Yeah.
Um, well, Scott, really appreciate your time this morning. Just want to give you a last shot to put any parting words of wisdom to the crowd as they're thinking about post-military life.
Yeah, I really appreciate the time with you, Mark. What I can't stress enough is, surround yourself with good people. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Definitely take the same amount of energy you're going to put into those other 2 big buckets of transition info, and really look at the business models and the concept of franchising, whether it's Neighborly or one of the other million franchises that are out there. I truly believe in I've been deeply engaged with transition assistance since I ran a base, and we had a big drawdown, and I was trying to connect the community with the base. So this has been a passion going on 12 years. And I've done a lot of research. That owning a business, especially a franchise, is probably the one place that I can say veterans are qualified or more than qualified to really be successful. I can't promise you that if I say, hey, Mark, go be a financial advisor at, some big finance company, or go be a project manager at the local whatever. I can't promise you that you're not going to do well in that, but you're only going to use a finite amount of your skills. The skills that every veteran brings to franchising and business ownership is completely transferable. It's probably the only place where you can use your leadership, use your decision making, risk taking, resourcefulness, go get it done attitude, and really succeed. So challenge everyone to get themselves educated, spend a third of their transition learning about this, And then my last plea to everybody, my name's not hard to find online. I'm on LinkedIn. If you send me an invite, just make sure you put a note on there that says, hey, I saw the podcast and I'd like to talk to you, because I love talking to veterans. I love making sure that I do my part to educate as much as I can. Whether or not you ever choose to do this is on you, but at least I know I did my part by saying, hey, open the aperture up a little bit. Let's have this conversation of what could be if you decide to go down this route.
Well, I appreciate you opening up yourself like that, Scott. Well, this has been awesome. Great conversation. Lots of good stuff in here for the audience. Really, really appreciate your time and your sharing your experiences here with the crowd. For everyone still listening, please like, subscribe, leave a review, and I'll see you all next week. Take care.